When Sofia Brennan walked into the Rocky Mountain Law Enforcement Training Institute, the instructors took one look at her scarred left hand and barely contained their smirks. They whispered about the damaged Marine who thought she could make it as a state trooper. What they didn't know was that this former combat engineer was about to shatter every shooting record in the Academy's 40-year history and expose a culture of discrimination that reached the highest levels of command. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm on Sofia Brennan's nightstand buzzed at 0430 hours, a ritual she'd maintained for 6 years since her medical discharge from the Marines. Her small apartment in downtown Denver was spartanly furnished, a single bookshelf lined with tactical manuals, a worn leather chair facing the window, and on the wall, a shadow box containing her Purple Heart combat action ribbon, and a faded photograph of her engineering unit outside Fallujah. She flexed her left hand slowly, working through the stiffness that always greeted her each morning. The scars ran from her wrist to her knuckles, a spider web of healed tissue where mortar shrapnel had torn through muscle and tendon 3 years ago. The hand functioned, but it would never be the same. Neither would she. Today marked a new beginning. After 18 months of physical therapy, psychological evaluations, and a mountain of paperwork, Sofia had finally been accepted into the Colorado State Police Academy. At 28, she was older than most recruits, but her 4 years as a Marine Corps combat engineer had taught her things civilian police training couldn't replicate: how to stay calm under fire, how to think 3 steps ahead, and how to never, ever quit. She dressed methodically in the Academy's prescribed physical training uniform, gray shorts, black t-shirt, and running shoes that had carried her through countless pre-dawn training runs. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a woman who'd been forged by experience, brown eyes that had seen too much, shoulders that carried invisible weight, and scars that told stories she rarely shared. The drive to the Rocky Mountain Law Enforcement Training Institute took 45 minutes through winding mountain roads. The facility sat on 200 acres of Colorado wilderness, its modern buildings nestled against dramatic red rock formations. As Sofia parked her aging Honda Civic between rows of pickup trucks and muscle cars, she noticed she was one of only 3 women in the parking lot. The Academy's main building buzzed with nervous energy. 42 recruits milled around the lobby, most in their early 20s, fresh-faced and eager. Sofia kept to herself, observing the social dynamics already forming small groups clustering by age, background, and familiarity. She'd learned long ago that first impressions in paramilitary environments were everything. "Listen up, recruits." A booming voice cut through the chatter. Instructor Lance Garrett emerged from a side office, his presence immediately commanding. Attention. Tall and broad-shouldered, with graying temples and the rigid posture of a career law enforcement officer, Garrett had the look of someone who'd seen it all and wasn't impressed by much. His eyes swept the assembled group, lingering disapprovingly on the few women present before settling on Sofia. She noticed how his gaze dropped to her scarred hand, then back to her face with unmistakable skepticism. "Welcome to hell," Garrett announced with a cold smile. "For the next 6 months, this academy will test every aspect of your fitness for police work. Physical conditioning, legal knowledge, firearms proficiency, tactical decision-making, and character assessment. 60% of you won't make it to graduation." He began walking among the recruits like a predator studying prey. "Some of you think your military service gives you an advantage. Some of you think your college degrees make you special. Some of you," his eyes found Sofia again, "think damaged goods can be rebuilt into something useful." The other recruits shifted uncomfortably. Sofia maintained perfect military bearing, but inside, she felt the familiar knot of determination forming in her stomach. She'd heard variations of this speech from drill instructors, platoon sergeants, and company commanders. The words changed, but the message was always the same: prove you belong or get out. Firearms training begins this afternoon, Garrett continued. We'll start with basic pistol marksmanship. For those with military experience, forget everything you think you know. Military shooting and police shooting are entirely different. Disciplines. After the orientation, recruits were divided into squads for initial processing. Sofia found herself assigned to Squad Charlie, led by a younger instructor named Officer Valdez. Unlike Garrett, Valdez seemed more interested in practical training than psychological intimidation. Former Marine? Valdez asked quietly as they walked toward the barracks. Combat Engineer, 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines, Sofia replied. Afghanistan, Iraq. 2 deployments. Valdez nodded with what seemed like genuine respect. Engineering's tough work. Different skill set than infantry, but just as dangerous. Sofia appreciated the acknowledgement, but she'd learned not to expect special treatment based on her service record. If anything, her military background seemed to make some instructors more determined to find her weaknesses. The academy barracks were functional, but comfortable single rooms with basic furnishings and shared bathroom facilities. Sofia unpacked efficiently, placing her few possessions with military precision. A knock on her door interrupted her routine. Hey, neighbor. A young woman with short blonde hair and a nervous smile stood in the doorway. I'm Jessica Patterson. Looks like we're the only 2 women on this floor. Sofia Brennan. She shook Patterson's hand, noting the firm grip of someone trying to project confidence. Former military? Patterson asked, gesturing towards Sofia's precisely arranged belongings. Marines. You? College ROTC, but never commissioned. Always wanted to be a cop, though. Patterson's enthusiasm was genuine but tinged with anxiety. Pretty intimidating bunch of instructors, huh? Sofia thought of Garrett's calculated dismissal, some more than others. That afternoon, the recruits assembled at the academy's firing range, a state-of-the-art facility with multiple shooting lanes and an arsenal of duty weapons. The Rocky Mountains provided a dramatic backdrop, but Sofia's attention focused entirely on the task ahead. Garrett stood behind a table laden with Glock 17 pistols, the standard issue sidearm for Colorado State Police. Firearms proficiency isn't optional in police work, he announced. It's a matter of life and death, yours and the public's. We'll start with basic marksmanship fundamentals and progress to combat shooting scenarios. He demonstrated proper stance, grip, and sight. Alignment with textbook precision. Sofia noticed several recruits taking careful notes, but her muscle memory was already adjusting to the weapon's feel and balance. The Glock was lighter than the M9 pistol she'd carried in Iraq, but the principles remained the same. Brennan, Garrett called out suddenly. Since you're our resident combat veteran, why don't you demonstrate for the class? Every eye turned toward Sofia. She recognized the setup, put the experienced person on the spot early, hoping to expose weaknesses or create an example. She'd seen it a dozen times in Marine training. Yes, sir. Sofia stepped forward and accepted the pistol Garrett offered. The weapon felt familiar despite its different specifications. She conducted a quick chamber check, confirmed the magazine was loaded, and moved to the firing line. 7 yards, standard police qualification target, Garrett announced loud enough for everyone to hear. Let's see what Marine training looks like. Sofia settled into her shooting stance, adjusting slightly to accommodate her left hand's limited flexibility. The range fell silent except for the wind whistling through the mountain peaks. She aligned the front sight, controlled her breathing, and squeezed the trigger smoothly. The shot broke cleanly. A distant metallic ding indicated a hit, but Garrett was already walking downrange with binoculars to assess the result. Center mass, he called back, his tone carefully neutral. Adequate for basic qualification. Sofia detected the subtle dismissal in his words. Adequate. She'd put the round exactly where she'd aimed a perfect center hit, but Garrett was determined to minimize her performance. As other recruits took their turns, Sofia observed the instruction carefully. Garrett was competent and knowledgeable, but she noticed how his coaching varied depending on the recruit. Male recruits received detailed technical advice and encouragement. The few women got perfunctory instruction and criticism that seemed designed to undermine confidence rather than improve performance. When Patterson's turn came, her nervousness was obvious. Her first shot missed the target entirely, disappearing into the mountainside beyond the range. Typical, Garrett muttered, just loud enough for nearby recruits to hear. Emotional instability leads to poor trigger control. Patterson's face flushed red, but she steadied herself and fired again. This shot hit the target's outer ring. Not great, but a significant improvement. Better, Garrett acknowledged grudgingly. But improvement means nothing if you can't maintain consistency under stress. Sofia watched the interaction with growing concern. She'd seen good instructors build confidence while maintaining standards. Garrett seemed more interested in breaking down certain recruits than developing their skills. After the range session, recruits returned their weapons and gathered for debrief. Garrett reviewed the afternoon's performance with characteristic bluntness. Most of you showed basic competency, he announced. A few demonstrated potential for development. Others, ... He let the sentence hang meaningfully. Well, we have 5 months to separate the qualified from the hopeful. As the group dispersed, Sofia noticed several male recruits clustering around Garrett, asking technical questions and receiving detailed responses. When she approached with her own question about sight adjustment techniques, Garrett's demeanor shifted noticeably. Standard police procedure is outlined in your manual, Brennan. I suggest you study it. His tone was dismissive, conversation clearly over. That evening, Sofia sat in her room reviewing the day's events. Garrett's bias was subtle but unmistakable, the kind of institutional discrimination that was difficult to prove but impossible to ignore. She'd faced similar challenges in the Marines, where some leaders questioned whether women belonged in combat roles, but this felt different, more personal. Garrett wasn't just questioning her gender's fitness for police work, he was specifically targeting her, using her injury as evidence of UNS-UIT ability. Why? Sofia flexed her scarred hand, feeling the familiar ache of damaged nerves and reconstructed joints. The doctors had told her she was lucky to retain 60% function. What they hadn't understood was that 60% of a Marine's capability was still more than most people's 100%. She opened her academy manual to the firearm section, but her mind wandered to the day's shooting exercise. Garrett had called her performance adequate, but Sofia knew better. Her shot placement had been precisely where she'd intended center mass, slightly high, accounting for the weapon's specific characteristics. She'd been holding back, not wanting to show off on the first day. But if Garrett was determined to use her as an example of failure, perhaps it was time to show him what a damaged Marine was really capable of. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and Sofia suspected Garrett was just getting started with his campaign to prove she didn't belong. But he'd made one critical error in judgment. He'd underestimated the determination of someone who'd already survived the worst kind of combat. The morning alarm would sound in 6 hours, beginning another day in what was clearly going to be a war of attrition. Sofia had fought that kind of war before, in places where the stakes were life and death. This time, she was fighting for something equally important, the right to serve again, and the chance to prove that scars were just evidence of survival, not symbols of weakness. The second day at Rocky Mountain Law Enforcement Training Institute began before dawn with mandatory physical training. Sofia joined the formation of recruits in the pre-dawn darkness, their breath visible in the crisp Colorado air. The academy's Fitness standards were demanding but not impossible, a far cry from Marine Corps conditioning, but challenging enough to weed out the unprepared. Instructor Garrett emerged from the main building wearing track pants and a VAC Academy sweatshirt, a whistle hanging around his neck like a badge of authority. His eyes swept the formation with practiced assessment, lingering on the women with obvious skepticism. "Physical fitness isn't negotiable in police work," he announced, his voice carrying easily across the silent group. "You'll chase suspects through alleys, climb fences, wrestle armed criminals to the ground. If you can't meet our standards, you're a liability to your future partners." The morning routine consisted of calisthenics followed by a 3-mile run through mountain trails. Sofia fell into the familiar rhythm of military-style PT, her body remembering the cadence even after months of civilian life. Her scarred hand ached during push-ups, but she compensated with adjusted positioning that distributed weight more evenly. During the run, she noticed Garrett watching her closely, as if expecting her to fall behind or drop out. Instead, Sofia maintained a steady pace in the front third of the formation, her Marine conditioning serving her well despite the altitude adjustment. Patterson struggled more obviously, falling toward the back of the group as they climbed steep switchbacks through pine forests. Sofia considered dropping back to encourage her, but decided against drawing additional attention to either of them. After PT, recruits showered and reported to the Academy's main classroom for legal instruction. The morning passed with lectures on constitutional law, arrest procedures, and use of force policies. Sofia took detailed notes, applying the analytical skills she developed studying explosive ordnance disposal techniques. During lunch break, she overheard conversations that revealed the social dynamics forming within their class. Most recruits came from law enforcement families or had previous security experience. A few were military veterans from various branches. Several had college degrees in criminal justice or related fields. Sofia kept to herself, eating efficiently while reviewing the afternoon's scheduled activities. Advanced firearms training was listed first, exactly what she'd been anticipating, with a mixture of confidence and wariness. The firing range looked different in afternoon light, with the Rocky Mountains providing a dramatic backdrop that reminded Sofia of training ranges she'd used in Afghanistan. The familiar smell of gun oil and cleaning solvents brought back memories of countless hours spent maintaining weapons in combat zones. Garrett had arranged the day's equipment with military precision. Each recruit was assigned a specific lane, complete with safety equipment, ammunition, and targets. Sofia noticed immediately that her assigned pistol looked different from the others older, with visible wear on the grip and a slight discoloration that suggested extensive use. "Today we'll focus on accuracy fundamentals," Garrett announced as recruits settled into their positions. "Proper grip, stance, sight alignment, and trigger control. These basics will determine whether you qualify for field duty or wash out of the program." He demonstrated each technique with textbook precision, his movements economical and practiced. Sofia found herself grudgingly impressed with his technical competence, even as she remained wary of his motivations. "Brennan," Garrett called out, as recruits began their practice drills. "Let's see if yesterday's performance was representative or just beginner's luck." Sofia stepped to her assigned lane and picked up the pistol he'd given her. The weapon felt immediately wrong. The grip was loose, suggesting worn components, and the trigger had an irregular feel that spoke of poor maintenance. She conducted a basic function check and discovered what she suspected. The sights were significantly misaligned. A properly maintained duty weapon would shoot to point of aim at standard distances. This pistol would require significant compensation to hit accurately. Whether the condition was intentional or coincidental, Sofia couldn't be sure, but the pattern was becoming clear. "Problem with your weapon, recruit?" Garrett asked with false concern. "No, sir," Sofia replied, making a quick mental calculation of the sight offset. "Just familiarizing myself with its characteristics." She'd faced similar challenges in Iraq, where Marines often had to adapt to borrowed or hastily repaired equipment. The key was rapid assessment and mental adjustment skills that civilian police training didn't typically require, but combat experience had ingrained. Sofia fired her first shot, consciously aiming several inches left to compensate for the sight misalignment. The round struck center mass, exactly where she'd intended. Interesting technique, Garrett observed loudly enough for nearby recruits to hear. Most qualified shooters rely on proper sight alignment rather than guesswork. Several recruits glanced over with curiosity. Sofia recognized the psychological warfare. Garrett was trying to make her look incompetent by implying she was using unconventional methods, born of ignorance rather than adaptation. She fired 4 more rounds in rapid succession, each one striking within the target's center ring. Despite the weapon's deficiencies, the group's pattern would have been impressive with a properly maintained pistol. With her assigned weapon, it was nearly impossible without significant skill and experience. Consistent performance, Garrett acknowledged with obvious reluctance. Though consistency with poor equipment isn't necessarily translatable to field conditions, Sofia understood the implication. He was setting up a narrative that her performance was somehow artificial or non-representative. She'd seen similar tactics used against female Marines who outperformed male counterparts. Their successes were always attributed to luck, special treatment, or circumstances that wouldn't apply in real situations. During the afternoon's second drill, Garrett introduced timed shooting exercises. Recruits had to engage multiple targets within specific time limits, simulating the rapid decision-making required in police encounters. When Sofia's turn came, Garrett made a show of checking his stopwatch. Standard qualification requires 6 hits out of 12 shots in 30 seconds. Adequate performance for someone without combat experience might be 4 hits. The subtle dig was clear. He was lowering expectations for her, while simultaneously suggesting that her military background was irrelevant. Sofia stepped to the firing line, assessed the target array, and waited for the start signal. Begin. Sofia's training took over. She engaged each target with methodical precision, compensating automatically for her weapon's quirks while maintaining the smooth rhythm essential for timed shooting. 12 shots in 23 seconds, 11 hits in the scoring zones. The other recruits fell silent. Even with the problematic pistol, Sofia's performance was exceptional by any standard. Garrett studied the targets through binoculars, his expression revealing nothing. 11 hits, 23 seconds, he announced finally. Above minimum standards. Again, the carefully neutral language that minimized an outstanding performance. Sofia was beginning to understand Garrett's strategy. He couldn't openly discriminate, but he could consistently undervalue her accomplishments while highlighting every minor flaw. After the range session, recruits cleaned their weapons and secured equipment. Sofia noticed several classmates watching her with new interest, particularly some of the male veterans who recognized superior marksmanship when they saw it. "Nice shooting," commented a tall recruit named Martinez, a former Army infantry soldier. "Where'd you learn to compensate for sight problems like that?" "Combat engineering requires adaptability," Sofia replied carefully. "Equipment doesn't always work perfectly in field conditions." Martinez nodded knowingly. "Yeah, I've been there." Garrett gave you a real piece of junk to work with, so others had noticed. Sofia filed that information away as potentially useful later. If Garrett's bias became more obvious, having witnesses might prove valuable. That evening, Sofia sat in her room cleaning her personal sidearm, a compact pistol she'd purchased after leaving the Marines. The familiar routine of disassembly, inspection, and reassembly was meditative, helping her process the day's events. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Patterson stood in the doorway, looking uncertain but determined. "Can I ask you something?" the younger woman said. "About shooting technique?" Sofia gestured for her to enter. "What's on your mind?" "Today was embarrassing," Patterson admitted. "I barely qualified, and Garrett made sure everyone knew it. I've been shooting since I was a kid, but something about this environment makes me nervous." Sofia studied Patterson's earnest face, recognizing the struggle of someone fighting both external pressure and internal doubt. Pressure affects everyone differently. The key is developing consistent fundamentals that work regardless of circumstances. They spent the next hour discussing breathing techniques, stance adjustments, and mental preparation. Sofia shared lessons learned from combat shooting without revealing specific operational details. Patterson proved to be an attentive student with genuine potential. Her poor performance seemed more related to anxiety than lack of ability. "Why are you helping me?" Patterson asked as their session concluded. "We're competing for the same thing." Sofia considered the question. In the Marines, individual success meant nothing if your unit failed. The academy was supposedly collaborative training, but Garrett was clearly trying to create a competitive atmosphere that pitted recruits against each other. "We're not enemies," Sofia replied. "Garrett wants us to think we are, but good cops support each other." Patterson nodded, though uncertainty remained in her eyes. "He really seems to have it out for you." "Maybe, but I've dealt with harder instructors in tougher situations." After Patterson left, Sofia returned to her weapon maintenance, but her mind wandered to the challenges ahead. Garrett's bias was becoming more obvious, but it was still subtle enough to deny if confronted directly. She needed to be smart about how she responded. Too aggressive, and she'd be labeled a troublemaker. Too passive, and she'd be seen as weak. The next few weeks would test more than her shooting skills. Garrett was clearly determined to prove she didn't belong, using whatever means necessary to support his preconceptions. Sofia had survived roadside bombs and enemy contact, but this felt like a different kind of warfare, one where the rules weren't clear and the objectives kept shifting. But she'd learned something important today. Despite Garrett's attempts at sabotage, her skills were undeniable. Other recruits were starting to notice, and some were beginning to question the instructor's methods. Sofia smiled grimly as she secured her pistol in its case. Garrett thought he was fighting a damaged veteran who'd gotten lucky on day one. He had no idea what a determined Marine was capable of when properly motivated. The real battle was just beginning. The third week at Rocky Mountain Law Enforcement Training Institute brought more advanced training scenarios, and with them, increasingly obvious attempts to undermine Sofia's progress. What had started as subtle bias was evolving into systematic sabotage, though always executed with enough plausible deniability to avoid formal complaints. Sofia arrived at the morning briefing to find the day's assignments posted on the bulletin board. Each recruit was paired with a training partner for tactical exercises, weapon transitions, and scenario-based drills. She scanned the list twice before finding her name paired with someone called Thompson K. Kevin Thompson turned out to be the most nervous recruit in their class, a 22-year-old college graduate who'd never fired a weapon before entering the academy. His hands shook during basic marksmanship drills, and he'd already failed 2 qualifying exercises. Pairing Sofia with Thompson guaranteed that her scores would suffer, since partner exercises averaged both participants' performance. "Interesting partnerships," Martinez commented quietly as they walked toward the equipment room. His partner was Jenkins, a former security guard with solid fundamentals and steady nerves. "Seems like some pairings are more strategic than others." Sofia glanced around at the other assignments. The strongest recruits had been paired together, virtually ensuring high scores. The weakest performers were paired with Sofia and the 2 other women in their class. The pattern was too obvious to be coincidental. "Thompson seems like a good kid," Sofia replied diplomatically. Everyone starts somewhere. But privately, she understood the game. Garrett was using Thompson's inexperience as a weapon against her. Banking on the young recruit's anxiety to drag down her performance, and create documentation of inconsistent results. The morning's first exercise involved weapon transitions, moving between pistol and shotgun while engaging multiple targets. Thompson's hands shook so badly he could barely load the shotgun, much less fire it accurately. "Take your time, Sofia," coached quietly during their practice round. "Focus on smooth mints rather than speed." Garrett appeared beside them with his ever-present clipboard. "Problem with the drill, Brennan?" "No, sir, just reviewing fundamentals with my partner." Thompson is responsible for his own performance. Coaching during evaluated exercises constitutes outside assistance. Garrett made a notation on his clipboard. "Continue with the drill as designed." Sofia recognized the trap. "Help Thompson and be accused of cheating. Ignore his struggles and be labeled a poor team player. Either way, their combined score would be mediocre at best." When their turn came for evaluation, Thompson fumbled the weapon transition so badly that he dropped the shotgun entirely. Sofia completed her portion flawlessly, but their average score placed them in the bottom third of the class. "Disappointing results," Garrett announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Partnership exercises reveal leadership ability and adaptability. Some recruits clearly struggle when they can't rely solely on individual performance." The implication stung because it was partially true. Sofia excelled at individual tasks but couldn't compensate for Thompson's panic-induced mistakes. Garrett was using her partner's weakness to create the appearance of her own limitations. During lunch break, Sofia approached Thompson privately. The young man was clearly dejected, picking at his food while avoiding eye contact with other recruits. "Rough morning," Sofia said, sitting across from him in the mostly empty cafeteria. "I'm going to wash out," Thompson muttered. "I can't handle the pressure. Every time Garrett watches me, I fall apart." Sofia studied his earnest face, recognizing the confidence crisis that could destroy a promising career. "What's your background?" "Before this?" "Computer science degree, internship with the sheriff's department doing digital forensics. I thought police work was mostly investigation and paperwork." Thompson's laugh was bitter. "Turns out I was wrong about the physical requirements. Digital forensics is crucial police work," Sofia said. "Not every cop needs to be a tactical specialist. You just need to meet minimum standards." "Tell that to Garrett. He acts like I'm personally insulting him by being here." Sofia understood the feeling. Some instructors use intimidation to weed out people they think don't belong. The question is whether you believe you belong. Thompson looked up for the first time during their conversation. "Do you think I belong?" Sofia considered her answer carefully. Thompson's technical skills were exactly what modern police departments needed, but his anxiety under pressure was a legitimate concern for field work. "I think you have skills the department needs," she said finally. "But you need to develop confidence under stress. That's trainable if you're willing to work." That afternoon brought defensive tactics training hand-to-hand combat scenarios in the academy's padded gymnasium. Sofia had expected this to be her strongest area, given her military combatives training, but Garrett had other plans. "Brennan, you'll be working with Officer Collins today," Garrett announced, gesturing toward a massive instructor who looked like he'd been recruited from professional wrestling. "Collins will help evaluate your defensive capabilities." Sofia sized up her opponent quickly. Collins stood at least 6'4" and probably weighed 250, with the build of someone who spent serious time in weight rooms. More concerning was the look in his eyes. This wasn't going to be a technical demonstration. "Standard defensive tactics assessment," Collins explained as they squared off on the practice mats. "I'll attack, you defend and control." "Show me what Marine training taught you." The first engagement was brutal. Collins came at her with full intensity, using his size and strength advantage without regard for the controlled environment typically maintained during training. Sofia managed to deflect his initial attack and create distance, But Collins pressed forward aggressively. "Come on, Marine," he taunted loud enough for watching recruits to hear. "Show us those killer instincts." Sofia recognized the psychological component of the assault. Collins wasn't just testing her defensive skills, he was trying to provoke her into an overreaction that could be used against her later. Lose control and be labeled dangerous. Fail to defend effectively and be called weak. She managed 3 more defensive sequences before Collins finally overpowered her with a takedown that drove the breath from her lungs. As she lay on the mat gasping, she heard Garrett's commentary to the assembled class. Defensive tactics require functional strength and leverage, not just technique. Size and injury history are legitimate factors in field effectiveness. The message was clear to everyone watching. Sofia's gender and combat injury made her a liability in physical confrontations, regardless of her skills or training. As recruits dispersed for evening study time, Sofia noticed the subtle shift in how others treated her. The morning's partnership, failure, and afternoon's physical demonstration had created exactly the impression Garrett intended. She was beginning to be seen as the weak link, skilled in limited areas, but unable to handle the full spectrum of police work. Patterson approached her outside the gymnasium, looking concerned. "That seemed excessive. Collins was way more aggressive with you than with the male recruits." "Different standards for different people," Sofia replied, though her ribs ached from Collins' takedown. "It's not fair. They're setting you up to fail." Sofia appreciated Patterson's support, but she knew complaining would only reinforce the perception that she couldn't handle criticism. Fair isn't the goal. Qualification is. That evening, Sofia sat in her room reviewing the day's events with growing frustration. Garrett's strategy was becoming clearer: create situations where her legitimate strengths were irrelevant while highlighting any area where she faced disadvantages. Partner her with weak performers. Match her against overwhelming physical opponents. Then document the predictable results as evidence of UNSUITABILOVE. I2Y. The approach was sophisticated because it appeared objective. On paper, Garrett was simply conducting standard evaluations. The fact that Sofia's evaluations were consistently designed to showcase her weaknesses rather than her strengths would be difficult to prove without access to his planning documents. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Equipment room, 2100 hours. Come alone." Sofia stared at the message suspiciously. Anonymous communications in training environments were usually trouble, but her curiosity was stronger than her caution. At exactly 9 o'clock, she made her way to the equipment room, finding the door slightly ajar. "In here," a voice called softly. Officer Valdez emerged from behind a rack of tactical gear, looking around nervously before closing the door behind her. "What's this about?" Sofia asked. "I've been watching what's happening to you," Valdez said without preamble. "Garrett's running a systematic campaign to force you out." "It's not the first time." Sofia felt her pulse quicken. "What do you mean?" 3 previous female recruits, 2 minority candidates, and a recruit with visible disabilities. All excellent performers who mysteriously developed consistency problems during Garrett's evaluations. Valdez pulled out a folder containing what appeared to be copied documents. "Equipment assignments, partner selections, exercise parameters. I've been documenting the patterns for months." Sofia examined the papers with growing anger. The evidence was damning. Garrett had been systematically sabotaging candidates he deemed undesirable for years, always maintaining enough plausible deniability to avoid official complaints. "Why are you showing me this?" Sofia asked. "Because you're different." The others eventually broke down or gave up. "You're still fighting back, and your performance is too good to ignore." Valdez met her eyes directly. "But it's going to get worse. Garrett's planning something for the advanced qualification exercises that's designed to end your academy career permanently." Sofia felt cold certainty settle in her stomach. She'd suspected Garrett's bias, but seeing documentary evidence of his systematic discrimination was both validating and terrifying. What kind of something? I don't know specifics yet, but I'll try to find out. In the meantime, document everything. Keep copies of all your scores, notes about equipment problems, witness names for incidents like today. As Valdez prepared to leave, Sofia grabbed his arm. Why risk helping me? Valdez paused at the door. Because good cops look out for each other, regardless of gender or background. Garrett represents everything wrong with old-school law enforcement culture. After he left, Sofia sat alone in her room with the COPPA documents spread across her desk. The evidence was clear. She was fighting more than one biased instructor. She was battling an entrenched system designed to exclude people like her. But now she had proof, an ally, and most importantly, advance warning of what was coming. Garrett thought he was hunting an isolated target who would eventually break under pressure. He was about to discover that Marines don't break, they adapt, overcome, and fight back twice as hard. By the 4th week at Rocky Mountain Law Enforcement Training Institute, Garrett's influence had spread like poison through the recruit class. What began as individual bias had evolved into a systematic campaign to isolate Sofia from her peers, turning potential allies into reluctant accomplices in her professional destruction. The shift became obvious during morning formation, when Sofia noticed recruits actively avoiding positions near her. Conversations stopped when she approached, and the easy camaraderie that had been developing among classmates suddenly excluded her entirely. Even Martinez, who had shown genuine respect for her abilities, now offered only polite nods instead of friendly conversation. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sofia understood the psychology at work. Garrett had made it clear that association with her was professionally dangerous. Recruits who supported her found themselves assigned to extra duties, subjected to increased scrutiny, or paired with problem partners for critical exercises. The message was unmistakable: maintain distance from Sofia Brennan, or risk your own academy career. The isolation strategy reached its peak during tactical scenario training. Recruits were divided into teams for complex exercises involving multiple suspects, civilian protection, and coordinated responses. These scenarios required communication, trust, and mutual support, exactly the elements Garrett was systematically undermining. Sofia found herself assigned to Team Delta, with 3 recruits who had already demonstrated their willingness to follow Garrett's unspoken guidance. Thompson remained her official partner, but his anxiety had worsened under the constant pressure. The other team members, Richards and Walsh, treated her with professional politeness that barely concealed their reluctance to work together. Team Delta will respond to a domestic violence scenario, Garrett announced during the morning briefing. Multiple suspects, potential hostages, unknown weapon status. Your performance will be evaluated on communication, tactical positioning, and successful resolution. Sofia studied the exercise parameters with growing concern. Domestic violence calls were among the most dangerous situations police faced, unpredictable, emotionally charged, and often involving multiple participants with conflicting accounts. Success required seamless teamwork and absolute trust between partners. The scenario took place in a mock apartment complex constructed on the academy grounds. Team Delta was given basic intelligence. Neighbors reported screaming and sounds of violence from apartment 2B. Possible domestic assault in progress. Unknown number of participants. No weapons confirmed but suspected. As team leader, Richards positioned everyone outside the apartment door. His assignments revealed the strategy immediately. Sofia was given the most exposed position, responsible for covering the rear exit, while the rest of the team made entry through the front door. Brennan, you'll monitor the back window in case suspects attempt to flee, Richards explained, his tone suggesting the decision was tactical rather than discriminatory. We need someone reliable in position to prevent escape. Sofia recognized the setup. The rear position was isolated, unable to provide backup to the entry team and unlikely to encounter any meaningful action. If the scenario went badly, she'd be too far away to help. If it went well, she'd have no opportunity to demonstrate competence. "Copy that," Sofia replied, knowing that arguing would only reinforce perceptions of her as a difficult team player. The exercise began with simulated dispatch information crackling through their radios. Team Delta approached the apartment building, while Sofia circled to the rear, taking position behind a concrete barrier that provided cover while maintaining visual contact with the target window. Through her earpiece, she heard Richards coordinate with Thompson and Walsh as they approached the front door. Their movements were textbook correct, but Sofia could hear the tension in their voices. Thompson's breathing was audible over the radio, a sign of the anxiety that consistently undermined his performance. "Entry team in position," Richards whispered. "Brennan, report status on rear exit." "Rear position secure, no movement observed," Sofia responded, scanning the window for any sign of the role-playing instructors who served as scenario participants. The front door entry was announced with proper police protocol, followed immediately by shouting from inside the apartment. Sofia could hear multiple voices, suspects, potential victims, and her teammates all talking over each other in the controlled chaos of the training scenario. "Suspect fleeing toward rear exit." Walsh's voice cut through the radio chatter. Sofia tensed, waiting for movement at the window, but nothing appeared. She maintained her position for 30 seconds before a different voice came through her earpiece. Garrett himself, speaking directly to exercise control. "Rear suspect has evaded containment. Exercise terminated. Debrief in 10 minutes. Sofia stared at the empty window in confusion. No one had attempted to exit through the rear. She'd maintained perfect visual contact with the only possible escape route, and no suspect had appeared. Either the exercise scenario had been changed midstream, or she was being blamed for a failure that hadn't actually occurred. During debrief, Garrett reviewed Team Delta's performance with his characteristic attention to shortcomings. Overall response was adequate, but the failure to contain all suspects represents a critical breakdown in tactical positioning. He consulted his clipboard with theatrical precision. "Brennan, explain how the rear suspect managed to escape your position." Sofia felt every eye in the room focus on her. "Sir, no suspect attempted exit through the rear window. I maintained visual contact throughout the exercise." "Interesting." Garrett's tone suggested he found her response predictable. Exercise control observed a suspect exit through the rear window at approximately 0347 hours. Perhaps the stress of isolation affected your situational awareness. The accusation was devastating because it was impossible to disprove. Sofia's word against exercise control, with no independent witnesses to support her version of events. The implication was clear: she'd failed at a basic surveillance task, allowing a dangerous suspect to escape. "I maintained continuous observation of the target window," Sofia insisted. "No individual exited through that location." "Are you suggesting our exercise controllers fabricated the escape?" Garrett's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "That's a serious accusation against Academy staff. The trap was perfect. Defend herself and be accused of questioning the integrity of the training program. Accept the blame and confirm her unsuitability for police work. Either response would be documented as evidence of poor judgment or inadequate performance." "No, sir," Sofia replied finally. "I'm reporting what I observed." Garrett made another notation on his clipboard. Defensive responses to constructive criticism suggest difficulty accepting responsibility for mistakes. This attitude could prove dangerous in field operations. After the debrief, Sofia walked alone across the academy grounds, feeling the weight of systematic isolation more heavily than ever. Her classmates avoided eye contact, unwilling to be seen talking to someone who had just been publicly humiliated for a failure that may not have actually occurred. Only Thompson approached her, his young face creased with worry. "I don't think anyone came out that window," he said quietly, glancing around nervously. "I was watching too, during the radio traffic." The timing doesn't match what Garrett said. Sofia felt a surge of gratitude toward the anxious recruit. "You were focused on the entry. Don't worry about the rear position." "But it's not right," Thompson insisted with unusual firmness. "They're lying about what happened." That evening, Sofia met Valdez again in the equipment room. His expression was grimmer than before, and he carried a thicker folder of documents. "It's getting worse," he said without preamble. "Garrett's building a comprehensive case for your dismissal. Performance inconsistencies, team integration problems, defensive attitude toward instruction." Sofia reviewed the copied performance reports with growing anger. Every incident had been documented with language that suggested legitimate concerns, while carefully omitting context that would explain her actual performance. "The domestic violence scenario was completely fabricated," she said. "No one exited through that window." "I know. I reviewed the exercise video afterward." Valdez pulled out a USB drive. "The rear camera shows continuous footage of the window. Area, no one appears." Sofia stared at the evidence of deliberate deception. "Then why isn't this in the official record?" "Because Garrett controls exercise documentation. The official report will show whatever version supports his conclusions." Valdez met her eyes directly. "This is bigger than bias, Sofia. This is systematic. Fraud designed to eliminate candidates he personally disapproves of." The implications were staggering. If Garrett was willing to falsify exercise results, then no amount of superior performance would protect her from dismissal. The Academy's evaluation system was completely compromised by his influence. "There's more," Valdez continued. "I found out about the advanced qualification exercise he's planning. It's called the Stress Inoculation Test, a new program he's implementing for the first time." Sofia felt cold certainty settle in her stomach. "What kind of test?" "Complex scenario involving multiple weapon systems, physical challenges, and psychological pressure. Designed to simulate the most extreme situations police might face." Valdez paused. "The equipment assignments and scenario parameters are being personally selected by Garrett." Sofia understood immediately. The test would be rigged from the beginning, designed to showcase every disadvantage she faced while minimizing her strengths. Garrett would finally have the dramatic failure he needed to justify her dismissal from the program. "When?" she asked. "Next Friday, 5 days to prepare." Valdez handed her the USB drive containing the exercise footage. "This proves he's been lying, but it won't stop what's coming. You need to be ready for something beyond normal Academy standards." After Valdez left, Sofia sat alone with the evidence of Garrett's deception spread across her desk. The video file clearly showed the empty window, confirming that her account had been accurate while the official version was fabricated. But proof of past lies wouldn't prevent future sabotage. Garrett was planning something unprecedented for the advanced qualification exercise, a final test designed to break her completely and provide irrefutable justification for her removal from the program. Sofia flexed her scarred hand, feeling the familiar ache of damaged nerves and reconstructed joints. 5 days to prepare for an unknown challenge designed by someone who wanted to see her fail. She'd faced longer odds in combat zones where the stakes were life and death. This time, she was fighting for her future and the chance to prove that. Damage didn't mean defeated. The final battle was approaching, and Sofia Brennan intended to be ready. The discovery of Garrett's fabricated exercise reports marked a turning point in Sofia's academy experience. Armed with concrete evidence of systematic deception, she faced a critical decision: remain silent, and hope to survive the upcoming stress. Inoculation test, or expose the corruption and risk immediate retaliation. The choice was made for her on Tuesday morning when she arrived at her assigned locker to find it standing open, her personal equipment scattered across the floor. Her backup magazines were missing, her protective gear had been moved, and most concerning of all, her personal training notes detailed observations about Garrett's methods had disappeared entirely. Sofia surveyed the damage with growing fury. The message was unmistakable. Garrett knew she was collecting evidence, and he was escalating his campaign accordingly. The missing notes contained her documentation of equipment sabotage, witness observations, and timeline records that would have been crucial for any formal complaint. Problem, Brennan? Garrett's voice carried false concern as he appeared behind her. Academy lockers aren't always secure. Recruits should be more careful with valuable items. Sofia met his gaze directly. Just reorganizing my equipment, sir. Good. Organization and attention to detail are crucial for police work. His smile was cold and predatory, especially during high-stress evaluations. After Garrett left, Sofia began the methodical process of inventorying what had been taken. The theft was surgical, nothing obviously valuable was missing, but every item that could serve as evidence of his misconduct had vanished. Her backup documentation, hidden in a sealed bag at the bottom of her gear pile, remained untouched only because Garrett hadn't thought to look that thoroughly. The violation felt deeply personal. In the Marines, tampering with another service member's equipment was considered one of the most serious breaches of trust possible. Lives depended on reliable gear, and sabotage could mean death in combat situations. That afternoon brought news that sent shockwaves through the recruit class. Patterson had been called to Commander Hayes' office and hadn't returned. Rumors spread quickly. Some claimed she'd been dismissed for academic deficiencies. Others suggested a family emergency had forced her withdrawal. Sofia found the truth in a brief note slipped under her door that evening. They offered me a choice transfer to a different academy session or be dismissed for performance issues. I couldn't prove the evaluation problems weren't my fault. I'm sorry I couldn't stay to help. The video evidence is in my old locker. Combination 0847. Don't let them win. JP. Sofia felt a mixture of anger and loss. Patterson had shown real potential despite her initial struggles, but Garrett had successfully manufactured enough performance issues to force her out. The pattern was becoming devastatingly clear. Recruit by recruit, Garrett was eliminating anyone who might support Sofia or question his methods. The academy felt different without Patterson's nervous but determined presence. Sofia was now completely isolated among her classmates, and even Thompson had grown distant after being reassigned to a different squad. The few recruits who still made eye contact did so with expressions of sympathy, mixed with relief that they weren't targets themselves. Wednesday's training brought the pre-test briefing for the stress inoculation test. Commander Hayes addressed the assembled recruits with unusual formality, suggesting the exercise carried special significance beyond normal academy evaluations. This evaluation represents the culmination of your firearms training, Hayes announced. You'll face multiple challenges designed to test your abilities under extreme pressure. Performance on this exercise will significantly influence your final academy ranking and assignment preferences. Garrett stepped forward with his characteristic clipboard, but his demeanor seemed more confident than usual. The test consists of 4 phases: precision shooting, tactical movement, weapon transitions, and a final challenge that will remain classified until execution. Sofia felt her pulse quicken. The mysterious 4th phase was almost certainly designed specifically for her, some impossible challenge that would provide the dramatic failure Garrett needed to justify her dismissal. Equipment will be assigned randomly, Garrett continued, making direct eye contact with Sofia. No personal weapons or modifications will be permitted. All participants will use standardized academy equipment to ensure fairness. The emphasis on fairness while maintaining eye contact was another psychological weapon. Garrett was advertising his intent to sabotage her equipment while using language that suggested objective evaluation standards. That evening, Sofia made her way to Patterson's former locker, finding it cleaned out except for a small package hidden behind the back panel. Inside was the USB drive containing the domestic violence exercise footage, along with a handwritten note. "I copied everything before they made me leave. Don't let my failure be meaningless." Sofia felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She was no longer fighting just for her own academy career. She was carrying the hopes of every recruit Garrett had systematically destroyed. Patterson, the previous female candidates Valdez had mentioned, and whoever would come after her if his methods weren't exposed. Thursday brought the final preparation day, and with it, an unexpected development. Officer Valdez approached her during lunch break with news that changed everything. "Hayes is asking questions," he said quietly, pretending to review training schedules. Someone filed an anonymous complaint about discriminatory evaluation practices. Hayes has ordered a review of all recent performance documentation. Sofia felt a surge of hope. What kind of review? Comprehensive audit of exercise records, equipment assignments, and scoring patterns. Valdez glanced around nervously. "But Garrett knows about it. He's accelerating his timeline." The implications were clear. If Hayes was investigating Garrett, needed to eliminate Sofia immediately before any audit could reveal the pattern of his misconduct. The stress inoculation test had become more than a rigged evaluation. It was Garrett's last chance to destroy her credibility permanently. "There's something else," Valdez continued. "Garrett requested permission to modify the test parameters this morning. He claimed new intelligence about field challenges required updated scenarios." Sofia understood immediately. Garrett was customizing the final challenge specifically for her, designing something so overwhelming that failure would appear inevitable and justified. No amount of skill or preparation could overcome an exercise rigged from the beginning. "What modifications?" she asked. "I don't know specifics, but he requisitioned additional equipment from the Tactical Training Division. Night vision, smoke grenades, audio distraction devices." Valdez met her eyes directly. "Whatever he's planning, it's beyond normal academy standards." That night, Sofia sat in her room preparing for what might be her final day at the academy. She cleaned her personal sidearm one last time, knowing she wouldn't be allowed to use it during the test, but needing the familiar ritual for mental preparation. Her scarred hand ached from the cold mountain air, reminding her of limitations she'd learned to compensate for through pure determination. She thought about the Marines who hadn't made it home from Iraq, and the promises she'd made to herself during those long months of rehabilitation. This academy represented more than career training. It was her chance to serve again, to find purpose beyond the damage that combat had inflicted. Garrett thought he was facing a damaged veteran who'd gotten lucky for a few weeks. He had no understanding of what a Marine could accomplish when everything she cared about was on the line. Sofia smiled grimly as she secured her weapon in its case. Tomorrow would bring challenges designed to break her, equipment sabotage to ensure failure, and psychological pressure calculated to destroy her confidence. But Garrett had made one critical error. He'd given her time to prepare allies who believed in justice and evidence of his own corruption. Most importantly, he'd underestimated the fundamental truth about Marines under pressure: they don't break, they reload. The final test was less than 12 hours away, and Sofia Brennan was ready for war. Friday morning arrived with unseasonable cold, frost covering the academy grounds like a crystalline warning of the challenges ahead. Sofia woke before her alarm, her body automatically preparing for the most important day of her academy career. The stress inoculation test would begin in 4 hours. And every minute of preparation could mean the difference between vindication and professional destruction. She began with her pre-combat ritual from Iraq: methodical equipment checks, mental rehearsal of possible scenarios, and the focused breathing techniques that had kept her calm during mortar attacks. Sofia understood that Garrett's test would be rigged, but she also knew that superior preparation could overcome even deliberate sabotage. Her first stop was the Academy Medical Office, where she requested official documentation of her combat injuries and current physical limitations. If Garrett planned to use her hand injury against her, she wanted medical evidence showing exactly what accommodations were reasonable and what challenges were genuinely impossible. Dr. Martinez, the Academy physician, examined her scarred hand with professional thoroughness. Significant tissue damage to the 4th and 5th digits, limited flexibility in metacarpal joints, reduced grip strength on the ulnar side, she dictated to her recording device. However, functional capacity remains within normal parameters. For police duty with minor ergonomic adjustments. Sofia requested copies of the evaluation, knowing that documentation of her actual capabilities would be crucial if Garrett attempted to claim her injury prevented successful completion of reasonable tasks. Her next preparation involved a careful study of Academy regulations regarding evaluation procedures. Sofia had noticed that Garrett's modifications to the stress inoculation test might violate established protocols for recruit assessment. If she could prove the test exceeded authorized parameters, his results would be invalid regardless of her performance. The Academy library contained archived copies of all training manuals and regulatory guidelines. Sofia spent 2 hours reviewing evaluation standards, equipment requirements, and appeals procedures. What she discovered was illuminating. Garrett's requested modifications appeared to exceed the Academy's authorized testing protocols by significant margins. According to official regulations, recruit evaluations must use standardized equipment meeting department specifications and scenarios representative of typical field challenges. Garrett's requisition of night vision equipment, smoke grenades, and audio distraction devices suggested a test designed to simulate combat operations rather than police work. Sofia photographed the relevant regulation pages with her phone, creating a backup record of the standards Garrett was apparently violating. If his test was illegitimate, her performance, whether successful or failed, couldn't be used to justify her dismissal. At 0800 hours, Sofia reported to the equipment room for gear assignment. The other test participants were already assembled, their nervous energy palpable in the confined space. Thompson looked particularly anxious, his hands shaking as he checked and rechecked his assigned pistol. Garrett supervised the equipment distribution personally, his confidence evident in every gesture. When Sofia's turn came, he handed her a service pistol with a slight smile that never reached his eyes. "Your assigned weapon, Brennan. I trust you'll find it meets Academy standards." Sofia accepted the pistol and immediately began her inspection routine. The weapon appeared functional, but subtle problems became apparent under closer examination. The grip texture was worn smooth, making secure handling difficult for someone with reduced grip strength. The trigger pull was inconsistent, suggesting internal wear that would affect accuracy. Most concerning, the magazine seated poorly, creating the possibility of feeding malfunctions under stress. "Problem with your equipment?" Garrett asked with false concern. "Just familiarizing myself with its characteristics, sir," Sofia replied. Knowing that complaints about equipment would be dismissed as excuse-making. She accepted the weapon despite its deficiencies, already calculating how to compensate for its limitations. Years of combat experience had taught her to adapt to imperfect equipment rather than depend on ideal conditions. The test participants were briefed on basic parameters without specific details about the mysterious 4th phase. They would begin with precision shooting at various distances, progress through tactical movement exercises, Demonstrate weapon transitions between pistol and shotgun, and conclude with the classified final challenge. During the pre-test preparation period, Sofia noticed Officer Valdez positioned near the equipment storage area. He caught her eye briefly and nodded toward a specific locker, suggesting he'd placed something there for her to find. When the opportunity arose, Sofia checked the indicated locker and discovered a small package containing backup ammunition and a brief note, "Secondary magazines tested and functional. Use these if primary equipment fails." Documentation of test parameters attached. The attached papers showed Garrett's official modification requests, revealing the extent of his planned sabotage. The fourth phase would involve low-light, tactical shooting under auditory and visual distraction, with time constraints exceeding standard qualification parameters. The description was deliberately vague, but the implications were clear. Garrett had designed a challenge that would overwhelm even experienced officers under ideal conditions. Sofia memorized the test parameters and returned the documents to their hiding place. Valdez was taking significant risks to help her, and she couldn't afford to expose his involvement if Garrett discovered their communication dot at 1,000 hours. Commander Hayes arrived to observe the testing, his presence adding official weight to the proceedings. Sofia noticed Hayes watching Garrett carefully, suggesting the anonymous complaint and subsequent investigation were influencing Academy leadership's attention to evaluation procedures. "This represents the Academy's most comprehensive skills assessment," Hayes announced to the assembled participants. "Your performance will be evaluated by multiple instructors using objective scoring criteria. Excellence in all phases demonstrates readiness for field assignment." Garrett stepped forward with his characteristic clipboard, but Sofia detected subtle tension in his posture. Hayes' presence was clearly making him uncomfortable, though he maintained his usual professional demeanor. "Phase 1 begins in 15 minutes, Garrett announced. "Precision shooting at 50, 75, and 100 yards. Standard time limits, standard scoring procedures." Sofia used the remaining preparation time for final mental rehearsal. She visualized each phase of the test, planned her responses to likely equipment failures, and prepared psychological strategies for maintaining focus under deliberate pressure. Thompson approached her during the final minutes, his nervousness evident, but his expression determined. "Whatever happens during this test," he said quietly, "I want you to know that some of us see what's really going on here." Sofia felt a surge of gratitude toward the young recruit who'd found the courage to speak truth despite obvious personal risk. "Focus on your own performance," she replied. "Do your best and let the results speak for themselves." But privately, Sofia understood that her results would be interpreted through the lens of Garrett's predetermined conclusions, regardless of their objective quality. She wasn't just competing against test standards, she was fighting a rigged system designed to ensure her failure. The other participants took their positions at the firing line as Garrett consulted his watch with theatrical precision. Sofia checked her equipment one final time, accepted the limitations of her sabotaged pistol, and prepared to demonstrate that a determined Marine could excel despite every disadvantage. "Phase 1 commences in 60 seconds, Garrett announced, his voice carrying anticipation of the failure he'd carefully orchestrated. Sofia settled into her shooting stance, feeling the familiar calm that had carried her through countless dangerous situations. Garrett thought he was testing a damaged veteran with substandard equipment under impossible conditions. He was about to discover what a warrior looked like when everything was on the line. The whistle blew, and the final battle began. Phase 1 of the stress inoculation test began with deceptive simplicity. 10 shots at 50 yards, a distance that should have been routine for anyone who'd survived Academy firearms training. But Sofia immediately understood that nothing about this test would be routine. Her assigned firing lane positioned her directly downwind from the Academy's diesel generator, filling her nostrils with exhaust fumes that burned her eyes and disrupted her breathing rhythm. The target stand wobbled slightly in the mountain breeze, creating movement that would affect precision shooting. Most telling of all, her lane's shooting mat was positioned on uneven ground that made stable prone shooting nearly impossible. Sofia observed the other participants settling into their positions with equipment that appeared properly maintained and shooting conditions that looked suspiciously ideal. Thompson, 3 lanes to her right, had been assigned a stable platform and relatively calm wind conditions. The contrast was too obvious to be coincidental. She examined her sabotaged pistol one final time, noting the worn grip texture and inconsistent trigger that would challenge even experienced shooters. The magazine seated with a slight wobble that could cause feeding failures under rapid fire conditions. Garrett had provided her with a weapon that might function, but would never perform optimally. "Commence firing." Garrett's voice carried across the range with barely contained anticipation. Sofia settled into the best shooting position her equipment and terrain allowed, adjusting her stance to compensate for the uneven ground. The diesel fumes made her eyes water, but she'd learned to shoot accurately under worse conditions during sandstorms in Iraq. Her first shot broke cleanly despite the pistol's poor trigger. The distant target showed a hit in the 8-ring, not perfect, but respectable given the circumstances. Sofia continued her string, each shot requiring conscious compensation for the weapon's deficiencies and the lane's disadvantages. As other participants completed their strings, Sofia could hear Garrett's commentary to observer haze. Interesting how stress affects different shooters. Some maintain composure under pressure, others struggle with equipment challenges. The implication was clear to anyone listening. Sofia's slightly slower pace and careful shot placement were being characterized as stress-induced struggle rather than intelligent adaptation to poor conditions. When scoring was announced, Sofia's performance placed her in the middle of the group, adequate but not outstanding. Garrett made careful notations on his clipboard, establishing the narrative of mediocre performance that would justify later claims of unsuitability. Phase 2 introduced tactical movement combined with marksmanship. Participants had to navigate an obstacle course while engaging targets at various positions, simulating the complex challenges of real police encounters. Sofia studied the course layout with growing concern. Her assigned path required significantly more physical movement than the other routes, including a low crawl under barricades that would be particularly challenging for someone with hand mobility issues. The target positions along her route were also more difficult, requiring shots from awkward angles and unstable platforms. Movement and marksmanship integration separates competent officers from exceptional ones, Garrett announced as participants prepared for the exercise. This phase tests your ability to maintain accuracy while managing physical stress. Sofia began her run, knowing that success would require perfect execution, despite deliberately imposed disadvantages. She moved through the course with practiced efficiency, using techniques learned during combat patrols to maintain balance while engaging targets. The low crawl section tested her injured hand severely, sending sharp pain through reconstructed joints as she dragged herself under simulated debris. But Sofia had endured worse discomfort during actual combat operations, and she pushed through the pain to reach her firing positions on schedule. Her shooting from unstable platforms demonstrated the value of combat experience. Where other participants struggled with positions they'd never encountered in training, Sofia adapted quickly using lessons learned from firing positions in damaged buildings and improvised fighting positions. Despite the course's built-in challenges, Sofia completed Phase 2 with a respectable time and acceptable accuracy. Her performance wasn't spectacular, but it was clearly competent, exactly what Garrett had hoped to prevent. Commander Hayes observed the exercise with increasing attention, taking his own notes rather than relying solely on Garrett's official documentation. Sofia noticed Hayes paying particular attention to the different course layouts and equipment assignments, suggesting he was beginning to recognize the disparity in testing conditions. Phase 3 brought weapon transitions between pistol and shotgun under time pressure. Participants had to demonstrate proficiency with both weapons while navigating a complex scenario involving multiple targets and changing tactical requirements. Sofia approached this phase with cautious optimism. Weapon transitions had been a specialty during her Marine service, where combat engineers often carried multiple weapon systems for different operational requirements, but Garrett had prepared special challenges for this phase as well. Sofia's assigned shotgun was an older model with a finicky safety mechanism and irregular shell feeding. The transition drill required her to move between weapons while wearing a bulky protective vest that limited range of motion equipment that other participants didn't seem to be using. The scenario began with simulated RADIO traffic describing a high-risk arrest warrant involving armed suspects and potential hostages. Sofia had to engage initial targets with her pistol, transition to shotgun for barrier penetration, then return to pistol for precision shooting around simulated civilians. Despite the equipment challenges, Sofia's muscle memory took over. She moved through the weapon transitions with practiced efficiency, compensating automatically for the shotgun's mechanical problems while maintaining situational awareness of the complex scenario. Her performance during Phase 3 was clearly superior to most other participants, demonstrating skills that couldn't be diminished by equipment sabotage. Even Garrett seemed surprised by her competence, his confident demeanor showing the first signs of concern. Hayes approached Garrett during the break before Phase 4, their conversation too quiet for Sofia to overhear, but obviously tense-based on their body language. Sofia noticed Hayes gesturing toward the equipment assignments and course layouts, suggesting he was questioning the disparities in testing conditions. Phase 4 will commence in 15 minutes, Garrett announced, his voice slightly strained. The final challenge has been designed to test your capabilities under maximum stress conditions. Sofia used the preparation time to check Valdez's backup equipment, finding the secondary magazines loaded with reliable ammunition that would function regardless of her pistol's deficiencies. Whatever Garrett had planned for the final phase, she would at least have functional ammunition to work with. Thompson approached during the break, his face pale but determined. "I've been watching what they're doing to you," he said quietly. "The equipment, the course setup, everything. It's not fair." "Fair isn't the goal," Sofia replied, though she appreciated his recognition of the systematic disadvantages. "Completion is." As participants prepared for the final phase, Sofia noticed additional equipment being set up around the test area. Night vision simulation goggles, smoke generators, and audio equipment that would create the sensory chaos Garrett had planned for her. Ultimate challenge. The mystery fourth phase was about to be revealed, and Sofia suspected it would be unlike anything in standard police academy training. Garrett had designed this challenge specifically to break her, using every advantage his position provided to ensure her failure. But Sofia had survived mortar attacks, roadside bombs, and the long journey back from combat injuries that doctors said might end her career permanently. She'd already proven that determination could overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable. Garrett was about to learn that a Marine's definition of impossible was very different from a civilian instructor's understanding of challenging. The final phase was beginning, and Sofia Brennan was ready to show him exactly what a warrior could accomplish when everything she'd worked for was on the line. Phase 4 began with an announcement that sent ripples of concern through the assembled participants. "The final challenge will be conducted individually," Garrett declared, his confidence returning as he prepared to unveil his masterpiece of sabotage. Each participant will face a complex scenario designed to test every skill acquired during academy training. Sofia watched as other recruits were called forward one by one, disappearing into a specially constructed training facility that had been sealed off from observation. Participants emerged looking shaken, but generally satisfied with their performance, suggesting the challenges were difficult but manageable for most recruits. When Thompson's turn came, he glanced back at Sofia with an expression of nervous solidarity before entering the facility. 20 minutes later, he emerged looking relieved, giving her a subtle thumbs up that suggested his version of the test had been challenging but fair. "Brennan, you're up," Garrett called finally, his voice carrying barely concealed anticipation. Sofia approached the facility entrance, where Garrett waited with Commander Hayes and 2 other instructors she didn't recognize. The presence of additional evaluators suggested this phase carried special significance, or that Hayes wanted witnesses for whatever was about to unfold. "Your scenario involves a hostage situation with multiple suspects and civilian casualties," Garrett explained with theatrical formality. "You'll have limited visibility, auditory distractions, and time pressure to simulate extreme stress conditions." Sofia noticed the equipment staged around the facility entrance: night vision goggles, protective gear, and weapons that looked more appropriate for military operations than police work. The setup confirmed her suspicions. Garrett had designed a challenge that exceeded normal academy parameters. "Questions about the exercise parameters?" Hayes asked, his tone suggesting genuine concern about the test's legitimacy. "No, sir," Sofia replied, though privately she understood this was the trap Garrett had been planning for weeks. She entered the facility to find a maze-like structure, constructed from movable walls and obstacles. Smoke machines filled the air, with thick, disorienting haze that limited visibility to a few feet. Audio speakers blasted a cacophony of sirens, shouting, and simulated gunfire that would challenge anyone's ability to hear important commands or identify threats. The scenario briefing crackled through a speaker system barely audible over the chaos. Multiple armed suspects holding hostages in a residential structure. Unknown number of civilians at risk. Suspects are firing at responding officers. Your mission is to neutralize threats and secure civilians within 8 minutes. Sofia immediately recognized the impossible nature of the challenge. 8 minutes was an unrealistically short time frame for the complex scenario Garrett had constructed. The limited visibility and audio chaos would make target identification nearly impossible. The facility's layout seemed designed to create confusion rather than simulate realistic police operations. But Sofia had faced similar conditions during night raids in Iraq, where smoke, darkness, and enemy fire created chaos that tested every aspect of combat training. She began moving through the facility with the methodical approach that had kept her alive during actual combat operations. The first challenge appeared through the smoke, a figure holding what appeared to be a weapon pointed toward her. Sofia's training took over as she assessed the threat, identified the target as legitimate, and engaged with controlled precision. Her sabotaged pistol fired as expected, and she scored a successful hit on the target's center mass. Moving deeper into the facility, Sofia encountered increasingly complex scenarios. Targets appeared and disappeared in the smoke, some threatening, others clearly representing civilians who had to be protected rather than engaged. The audio chaos made it nearly impossible to hear scenario cues, forcing her to rely entirely on visual assessment under severely limited visibility. Her scarred hand began aching from the stress. Position required to maintain weapon control in the confined space, but Sofia pushed through the discomfort using pain management techniques learned during rehabilitation. The backup ammunition Valdez had provided functioned flawlessly, compensating for her pistol's feeding problems. As Sofia navigated the facility's final section, she realized the true nature of Garrett's trap. The scenario was designed to be impossible to complete successfully within the time limit, regardless of skill level. Even perfect performance would result in failure to meet the arbitrary standards Garrett had established, But Sofia had learned something important during her combat experience. Sometimes the mission parameters were wrong, and intelligent soldiers adapted objectives to match realistic capabilities rather than accepting impossible demands. Instead of rushing through the remaining scenarios in a futile attempt to meet Garrett's timeline, Sofia slowed her pace and focused on perfect execution of each challenge. She engaged threats with methodical precision, carefully identified civilians, and cleared each section of the facility with textbook tactics. When the 8-minute buzzer sounded, Sofia was still moving through the final obstacles, but her performance up to that point had been flawless. She had demonstrated superior marksmanship, excellent tactical judgment, and adaptive problem-solving under extreme conditions. Sofia emerged from the facility knowing she had performed exceptionally well by any reasonable standard, but also understanding that Garrett would focus on her failure to complete the entire scenario within his arbitrary timeline. Incomplete, Garrett announced immediately, consulting his stopwatch with theatrical precision. Failure to complete scenario objectives within established timeframe indicates inability to perform under stress. Commander Hayes stepped forward, his expression skeptical. What were the completion times for other participants? Sofia noticed Garrett's momentary hesitation before responding. Other participants faced modified scenarios appropriate to their experience levels. Modified how? Hayes pressed, his tone indicating growing suspicion about the evaluation's legitimacy. The scenarios were adjusted to reflect realistic expectations for new recruits, Garrett replied carefully. Sofia understood immediately. Other participants had faced easier challenges with longer time limits, while her test had been specifically designed to be impossible. Garrett had created two different standards, one for recruits he wanted to pass, and another for the recruit he was determined to fail. I'd like to review the scenario parameters for all participants, Hayes said firmly. The Academy maintains strict standards for evaluation consistency. For the first time since the testing began, Sofia saw genuine concern cross Garrett's face. Hayes was questioning the integrity of the entire exercise, threatening to expose the systematic bias that had characterized Sofia's entire Academy experience. Of course, sir, Garrett replied, though his confident demeanor was cracking. The documentation is available for review. Sofia knew the documentation would either be falsified or would reveal the disparate standards Garrett had applied. Either outcome would expose his misconduct, but she couldn't depend on administrative processes to provide justice. As the evaluation team huddled to discuss scoring procedures, Sofia reflected on her performance during the impossible challenge. She had demonstrated every skill the Academy claimed to value: marksmanship, tactical thinking, adaptability, and grace under pressure. More importantly, she had proven to herself that her combat injuries hadn't diminished her capabilities as much as she'd feared. The hand that doctors said might never function properly had performed flawlessly when everything was on the line. Garrett had designed his test to break her spirit and justify her dismissal from the program. Instead, he had provided her with the opportunity to demonstrate that a determined Marine could excel under conditions that would overwhelm most people. The evaluation team's discussion continued for several minutes, with Hayes asking increasingly pointed questions about scoring criteria and scenario consistency. Sofia could see Garrett struggling to explain disparities that were becoming impossible to justify. Finally, Hayes approached with the official results. His expression was carefully neutral, but Sofia detected something in his eyes that suggested the outcome might not be what Garrett had planned. The evaluation results require additional review before final determination, Hayes announced. All participants will be notified of their status within 24 hours. Sofia felt a surge of hope mixed with wariness. Hayes' decision to delay results suggested he'd found problems with Garrett's evaluation methods, but it also meant another day of uncertainty about her Academy future. As participants dispersed, Sofia noticed Garrett's face had gone pale. His carefully orchestrated plan to destroy her credibility was unraveling under official scrutiny, and he seemed to realize that his own position might now be in jeopardy. The test was over, but the real battle for justice was just beginning. The 24 hours following the stress inoculation test felt longer than any day Sofia had experienced since her combat deployments. The academy buzzed with rumors and speculation as word spread that Commander Hayes had ordered a comprehensive review of the evaluation procedures. For the first time in weeks, Sofia sensed a shift in the atmosphere. Doubt was creeping into Garrett's previously unshakable authority. Sofia spent the waiting period documenting everything she could remember about her academy experience. Using the notes she'd hidden from Garrett's locker search, she compiled a detailed timeline of discriminatory incidents, equipment sabotage, and evaluation irregularities. If Hayes' investigation provided an opportunity to present evidence, she wanted to be prepared that the break came sooner than expected. At 0800 hours on Saturday morning, Sofia received a message to report to Commander Hayes' office immediately. The summons included an unusual instruction: bring any documentation relevant to your academy experience. Sofia gathered her hidden evidence files, Valdez's USB drive containing the fabricated exercise footage, and Patterson's farewell note that confirmed the pattern of forced withdrawals. Whatever was happening in Hayes' office, she intended to be ready. She arrived to find an unexpected assembly. Commander Hayes sat behind his desk with two people Sofia didn't recognize: a woman in civilian clothes carrying a laptop and a man wearing the uniform of a senior state police official. Officer Valdez stood near the window, looking nervous but determined. "Specialist Brennan, please take a seat," Hayes began formally. "This is Inspector Rodriguez from the State Police Internal Affairs Division and Agent Chun from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. They're here to discuss irregularities that have come to light regarding academy evaluation procedures." Sofia felt her pulse quicken. Internal Affairs and the EEOC meant this investigation had escalated far beyond academy-level concerns. Garrett's systematic discrimination had attracted the attention of agencies with real enforcement power. Inspector Rodriguez leaned forward with the focused attention of someone conducting a serious investigation. "We've been reviewing your academy records, along with documentation provided by Officer Valdez and other sources. What we've found suggests a pattern of discriminatory evaluation practices that may violate both departmental policies and federal law." Agent Chun opened her laptop and displayed a spreadsheet showing performance data for the past 3 academy classes. The numbers told a damning story: female recruits and minorities consistently received lower scores than male candidates with similar backgrounds, and their failure rates were significantly higher despite comparable entrance qualifications. Officer Valdez has provided video evidence of falsified exercise reports. Rodriguez continued, nodding toward Valdez, who looked relieved to finally speak truth openly. "We've also discovered that Instructor Garrett modified your evaluation parameters without authorization, using equipment and scenarios that exceeded academy standards." Sofia realized the investigation had uncovered more than she'd hoped possible. Valdez had clearly provided comprehensive documentation of Garrett's misconduct, and the agencies had done their own analysis of systemic patterns. "We'd like you to review these findings and provide your own account of your academy experience," Agent Chun said, turning the laptop screen toward Sofia. "Anything you can add to our understanding of how these irregularities affected your training." Sofia spent the next hour walking the investigators through her documentation, explaining each incident and providing context they might not have understood from records alone. She described the equipment sabotage, the impossible partnership assignments, and the escalating isolation campaign that had eliminated potential allies. The investigators took detailed notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions that demonstrated their thorough understanding of discriminatory practices. Sofia realized they'd probably seen similar patterns at other institutions. This wasn't their first investigation of systematic bias in law enforcement training. Your performance during the stress inoculation test was particularly interesting, Rodriguez noted, consulting his own files. According to the scenario parameters Garrett submitted, your test was approximately 3 times more difficult than the standard evaluation other recruits received. Agent Chun pulled up video footage from the test facility's security cameras. We've reviewed all recordings from Phase 4. Your performance was actually exceptional by any reasonable standard. You achieved perfect scores on threat, identification, and marksmanship despite conditions that would challenge experienced officers. Sofia watched herself navigate the impossible scenario on the security footage, seeing her performance from an objective perspective for the first time. Even knowing the test was rigged, she'd adapted and excelled using skills that no amount of bias could diminish. Garrett's evaluation claimed you failed to complete the scenario within time limits, Rodriguez continued. But our analysis shows the timeline he established was physically impossible for the course he designed. No recruit could have succeeded under those parameters. The validation was overwhelming. After weeks of questioning her own perceptions and abilities, official investigators were confirming that her assessment of systematic bias had been accurate. Garrett's discrimination wasn't subtle or debatable. It was blatant misconduct that violated multiple policies and laws. What happens now? Sofia asked. Inspector Rodriguez exchanged glances with Agent Chun before responding. Instructor Garrett has been placed on administrative leave pending the completion of our investigation. His evaluation authority has been suspended, and all his recent performance assessments are being reviewed. Additionally, Agent Chun added, the Academy will be implementing new oversight procedures to prevent similar discrimination. Your class will be re-evaluated using standardized criteria, and any recruit who was improperly dismissed will have the opportunity to complete their training. Sofia felt a surge of hope mixed with concern for the recruits who had already been forced out. What about Patterson and the others who were dismissed? They'll be contacted and offered the chance to return if they choose, Rodriguez confirmed. The investigation found clear evidence that their dismissals were based on fabricated performance issues rather than legitimate deficiencies. Hayes spoke for the first time since the briefing began. I want to personally apologize for what happened in my academy. The discrimination you experienced was unacceptable and contrary to everything this institution represents. His words carried genuine remorse, but Sofia detected something else in his expression: professional embarrassment that such misconduct had occurred under his command. She suspected Hayes would be implementing changes to ensure this situation never happened again. There's one more thing, Agent Chun said, consulting her notes. Your performance throughout this academy session, when evaluated using proper standards, places you among the top graduates in academy history. The state police has expressed interest in fast-tracking you for specialized assignments. Sofia felt stunned by the revelation. Despite months of systematic sabotage, her actual performance had been exceptional enough to attract attention from state-level leadership. Garrett's attempts to destroy her credibility had ironically created documentation of her superior abilities. We'll need you to complete some additional paperwork, Rodriguez explained. But your academy graduation is confirmed. Congratulations, Officer Brennan. The title felt surreal after months of uncertainty. Sofia had entered the academy hoping to prove she could meet basic standards despite her combat injuries. Instead, she was graduating with distinction and offers for advanced assignments. As the meeting concluded, Officer Valdez approached with a mixture of relief and satisfaction. I'm glad we finally got him, he said quietly. Garrett destroyed too many good recruits over the years. Sofia shook his hand firmly. Thank you for having the courage to speak up. None of this would have happened without your evidence, Valdez smiled. Good cops look out for each other. Always. That afternoon, Sofia called her former Marine squad leader to share the news. His pride was evident even through the phone connection as she described her graduation and the investigation's outcome. "I always knew you'd find a way to serve again," he said. Garrett picked the wrong Marine to mess with. As evening approached, Sofia sat in her room looking at the official academy graduation certificate that had been expedited following the investigation's conclusions. The document represented more than successful training completion. It was vindication of her belief that determination could overcome even systematic discrimination. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Patterson. "Heard the news about Garrett. Thank you for not giving up. See you when I get back to finish what we started." Sofia smiled, knowing that justice had been served not just for her, but for every recruit whose dreams had been nearly destroyed by one instructor's prejudice and abuse of power. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as a sworn peace officer. But tonight she could finally rest, knowing that she'd proven something important to herself and others. Scars were just evidence of survival, and a warrior's spirit couldn't be broken by those who lacked the courage to understand what real strength looked like. 6 months after her academy graduation, Officer Sofia Brennan stood at the entrance of the Rocky Mountain Law Enforcement Training Institute wearing the crisp uniform of a Colorado State Police instructor. The autumn mountain air carried the same crisp clarity she remembered from her recruit days, but everything else had fundamentally changed. The academy had undergone comprehensive reforms following the internal affairs investigation. New oversight procedures ensured objective evaluations, equipment assignments were randomized and documented, and multiple instructors were required to sign off on any recruit dismissals. Most importantly, the culture of intimidation that had characterized Garrett's tenure had been replaced by an environment focused on developing each recruit's potential, rather than weeding out those deemed unworthy. Sofia's return to the academy wasn't coincidental. Commander Hayes had personally requested her assignment to the instruction staff, recognizing that her unique combination of combat experience, advanced marksmanship skills, and understanding of discriminatory practices made her ideal for training the next generation of officers. "Ready for your first class?" Officer Valdez asked as they walked toward the main instruction building. He'd been promoted to senior instructor following his crucial role in exposing Garrett's misconduct, and the two had developed a strong working partnership based on mutual respect and shared commitment to fair training standards. As ready as anyone can be for 24 new recruits who think they know everything about police work, Sofia replied with a smile that would have been impossible during her own recruit days. The incoming class represented the most diverse group in academy history: 12 women, 8 minority candidates, 2 veterans with visible disabilities, and 2 recruits over age 40 who were changing careers. Sofia suspected the increased diversity wasn't entirely coincidental, as the state police had made conscious efforts to recruit candidates who might have been overlooked in previous years. As she entered the classroom where her own academy journey had begun, Sofia reflected on the changes that investigation had produced throughout Colorado law enforcement. Garrett's misconduct had triggered reviews at multiple agencies, resulting in policy changes, sensitivity training, and the quiet removal of several other instructors whose evaluation patterns showed similar discriminatory tendencies. The new recruits filed into the classroom with a familiar mixture of excitement and anxiety Sofia remembered from her own first day. She positioned herself at the front of the room, noting how different the dynamic felt from this side of the instructor's podium. "Good morning, recruits," Sofia began, her voice carrying the authority earned through proven competence rather than institutional intimidation. "Welcome to firearms instruction. I'm Officer Brennan, and I'll be your primary marksmanship instructor for the next 6 months." She paused to make eye contact with each recruit, remembering how important it had felt to be seen as an individual, rather than a problem to be solved. "Before we begin, I want to establish some ground rules that will govern our training environment." Sofia walked among the seated recruits as she spoke, using movement to emphasize her points. First, everyone starts with equal equipment and equal opportunity to succeed. No one receives advantages, and no one faces artificial disadvantages based on background, gender, or physical characteristics. Several recruits exchanged glances, suggesting they'd heard stories about previous academy practices. Sofia continued without acknowledging their reaction. Second, mistakes are learning opportunities, not character defects. Everyone here will struggle with something during training. My job is to help you overcome challenges, not to use them as evidence of unsuitability. She returned to the front of the classroom, her expression serious but encouraging. Third, you are teammates, not competitors. Your success doesn't depend on someone else's failure, and your responsibility includes supporting your classmates when they struggle. Sofia noticed several recruits relaxing visibly as she outlined expectations that prioritize development over elimination. The contrast with Garrett's intimidation-based approach was deliberate and important. Now let's talk about what you'll learn during firearms training. Sofia continued, displaying a presentation slide showing the Academy's updated curriculum. Advanced marksmanship, tactical shooting, crisis intervention techniques, and most importantly, decision-making under pressure. The morning progressed with basic orientation and equipment familiarization. Sofia made sure each recruit received properly maintained weapons and had time to ask questions about anything they didn't understand. The difference in atmosphere was remarkable. Instead of nervous tension, the classroom buzzed with engaged curiosity. During the lunch break, Sofia received an unexpected visitor. Thompson, now a graduating senior from the Academy's evening program, appeared in the instructor's office wearing the uniform of a deputy sheriff. "Officer Brennan," he said with a grin that showed how much his confidence had grown. "I wanted to thank you before I ship out to my first assignment." Sofia felt pride in the young man's transformation. Thompson had returned to complete his training after Garrett's dismissal, flourishing under instruction that focused on developing his strengths rather than exploiting his weaknesses. "You did the work," Sofia replied. "I just provided encouragement." "You did more than that," Thompson insisted. "You showed me that being different wasn't the same as being deficient. The department is getting a digital forensics specialist who can also handle field operations, something they didn't think was possible before." After Thompson left, Sofia returned to the afternoon's practical exercises with renewed appreciation for the impact good instruction could have on individual lives. The recruits moved through basic marksmanship drills with focus and determination, free from the psychological pressure that had characterized her own academy experience. One recruit in particular caught Sofia's attention, Maria Santos, a former Army medic whose left arm showed surgical scars from an IED blast in Afghanistan. Santos struggled with the standard pistol grip due to limited mobility in her fingers, but her tactical awareness and decision-making skills were exceptional. Sofia approached Santos during a break between exercises. "How's the grip feeling?" she asked quietly. "Challenging," Santos admitted. "I'm worried the instructors will think I can't handle the weapon requirements." Sofia smiled, remembering her own concerns about hand mobility during academy training. "Let me show you some adaptive techniques that might help." She spent 15 minutes working with Santos on modified grip positions and trigger control methods that accommodated her injury while maintaining shooting accuracy. The techniques Sofia shared were ones she'd developed herself during her own recovery and refinement process. "These work for you?" Santos asked after successfully completing a practice string with noticeably improved results. "They work for anyone willing to adapt rather than accepting limitations," Sofia replied. "Your injury doesn't define your capabilities, your response to it does." As the day concluded, Sofia reflected on the full circle her journey had taken. She'd entered the academy as a damaged veteran, hoping to prove she could meet minimum standards. Now she was helping other recruits with similar Challengers discover their own potential for excellence. The changes extended beyond individual success stories. Patterson had returned to complete her training and was now working as a community liaison officer, using her communication skills in ways that traditional academy instruction had never recognized. The other female recruits who'd been forced out during Garrett's tenure had also found success in various law enforcement roles. Most satisfying of all, the Academy's new evaluation procedures had eliminated the systematic bias that had nearly ended Sofia's own career. Recruits were succeeding or struggling based on actual performance rather than instructors' preconceptions about who belonged in law enforcement. That evening, Sofia sat in her office grading the day's exercises and planning the next week's instruction. On the wall behind her desk hung two items that reminded her of the journey that had brought her to this position: her academy graduation certificate and a simple framed note that read, "Vision is overrated. Perfect perception comes from within." Below those items, she'd added a new piece, a group photograph of her first instructor class at graduation, showing 24 diverse faces united by their shared accomplishment and commitment to service. Picture represented more than successful training completion. It was evidence that when artificial barriers were removed and fair evaluation standards applied, excellence emerged from unexpected places and people. Sofia's phone buzzed with a text message. From Commander Hayes, excellent training evaluations. From today's recruits. Keep up the outstanding work, Instructor Brennan. She smiled at the title that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. From struggling recruit to distinguished instructor, from target of discrimination to champion of fair training standards, the transformation was complete. Outside her office window, new recruits walked across the academy grounds discussing the day's lessons and preparing for tomorrow's challenges. They moved with confidence rather than fear, supported by an institution that had learned to value diversity and recognize potential in places previous leadership had refused to look. Sofia turned back to her lesson planning, knowing that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to help others discover their own capacity for excellence. The academy that had nearly broken her spirit was now the place where she helped ensure no other recruit would face the systematic discrimination that had almost ended her career. The circle was complete, but the mission continued. Excellence, Sofia had learned, wasn't about perfection. It was about the courage to keep fighting when others said you didn't belong, and the wisdom to help others find that same strength when their time came to prove themselves. In the end, Garrett had been wrong about everything that mattered. Vision wasn't about what others could see. It was about the determination to see beyond artificial limitations and discover what was truly possible. And what was possible, Sofia now knew, was extraordinary. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.